What's up, guys? This is the In Vivo Mindset Podcast Part 2. This is our second episode. Today, I'm excited to be talking about how we handle stress, how us as humans handle stress from an exercise standpoint and a lifestyle standpoint. The reason why I wanted to bring this conversation up is because I feel like it's one of those things that you hear stress and you think it's a bad thing. Stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. Stress is how we handle certain things. And pressures that we might have can be identified in different ways for us to better categorize them and how can we help ourselves understand what stress does to us and affects us. Stress, it's one of those things that gets a bad rep, and of course stress affects everybody. Lifestyle stress, not having adequate sleep stress, not working out stress, working out stress. All these things is doing something to your blood pressure. It's doing something to your heart rate. It's doing something to your energy levels. And what do you do to control your stress? A lot of people have their own ways of handling stress in different ways, right? We all have our mechanisms of relaxing. I tell people when it comes to working out, the muscle doesn't just contract, it also relaxes. It's not just contraction the whole time. It's not like you go and start training and it's contraction the whole time. In order for you to have better tissue adaptation, you have to understand how to relax. This is something I talk with my athletes about, my regular population about, because it's important to relax, to take it slow, to find your breath in everything you're doing. An easy way to get stressed out is by getting stressed out, stressing about stressing. It's very common, stress comes in many different ways. It depends if you have a family, it depends if you're by yourself. It depends on what is stressing you out. Sometimes we bite a little bit more than what we can chew. Sometimes we want to do a little bit of everything. That also plays a factor into how we feel and not knowing how to put 100% in something. These are things that I think it's important that we recognize. And I want to say one way that I like to handle stress and how to put things into perspective is by doing a simple pros and cons list. A pros and cons list can go a long way. I feel that sometimes this is something that can get overlooked because you look at it like, yeah, right, I'm not going to sit down and write down all these things, but there's so much power in writing. There's so much power in putting mind to physical matter, right? So mind to paper, like that is such a powerful tool. And I think it's underutilized because how many times do you exercise your penmanship when you're just typing or you're just typing through the screen? And this is like a lost art form in this digital age that we live in because it's something that we don't really think about, right? When was the last time you really wrote something in a physical paper? And I think it's important that we do that. And in order for us to really clear out the things that we have in our heads, we have to have clarity. And the only way you find clarity is by knowing what you're thinking. So what I like to do, pros and cons list. For example, if I'm gonna take upon a new challenge, first I'm gonna see what are the pros of this. What is the good things that I can get from this, right? You know, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. But then you have your cons, and then you outweigh what matters to you most. What would you feel better dealing with, right? And that's why sometimes you deal with the with the understanding of like less is more, or it's not your time right now to move on to that phase, and that's okay because the pros might not outweigh the cons, and although pros means more, cons being less makes you feel better. And that's one way that you can understand your stress from that standpoint is making decisions. Sometimes when you have too much on your plate, you have one, two, three, four, five things to choose out of. You got to simplify it. Why don't you just do one or one and two? Keep it simple. There's a reason why there's actually research and studies that In exams, there's a reason why there's multiple choice questions, and there's a reason why the tests become more difficult as the questionnaires become a little bit longer in questioning A, and B, and the choices you can respond to. It is a lot easier to choose something that is A or B opposed to A, B, C. Now, it depends on how you process that process of elimination. And if you're really good with that, but it can be very stressful, right? There's times that you go, shopping and you want to go buy a sneaker and you're like, well, I like these two, but I like that one, and you're kind of conflicted. Make it simple for you. Which one do you like more, and which one do you like second? And then keep it like that. It's simplifying your thought process, and that rationale can go a long way. That's from that perspective. I feel like those are things that really help me as a business owner, really help me as an individual dealing with a lot of members, dealing with employees, dealing with people. It's those things. I think that allows me to simplify what is going on. And I think that it benefits when you're able to, express these things to someone else and have them understand where you're coming from. Another thing I like to do is really understand what it takes for me to be working at my most optimal, you know, uh, my most optimal uh, position. What do I mean by that? For example, I know hydration is a key for me. I know what do I need to eat throughout the day that is key for me in order for me to perform my best. I know sleep affects me. I know me being glued onto my phone affects me. I know what affects me. I know what stresses me out. So I do things to de-stress me, right? I have a rule. I don't text after 10 o'clock. It's one of those things where I don't like to do, and sometimes there's occasion we're all human, but it's one of those things I really try to stay away from because it's something that is going to affect me if I'm now feeling like I'm not in my own time. And I remember, and I want to share this with you guys. I remember when I used to work um, for this company, and they used to send out emails. So the emails were being sent really early in the morning, sometimes 6 o'clock, 5 a.m., because that's the time they operated in. And I didn't have to clock in till really like later in throughout the day, maybe 8 or 10, depending on the situation. And there's times where they'll send something really urgent. And it's not because they wanted a response from me directly urgent. It's just because they operated in that time frame, right? They had a lot of things on their plate. So it's better that they sent emails earlier so they could get, these tasks done at hand. But at least for me, when I would wake up, it would give me a lot of anxiety just seeing those emails or seeing those text messages. So one way I like to, control that is waking up. I'll check whatever I have to do for myself throughout the day, but I'm not responding to text messages yet. I do that later on. I do that once I get to my car. I go through my morning routines. Routines is something that we're going to dive into, but I go through my morning routines, right? I take care of what I need to take care of, go have a cup of coffee. Right when I get in my car, let me send out whatever I need to send out, and then I'm going to drive. And I'm going to go play either a podcast, a book, or some music, something to put my mind at ease. And routines, it's what I'm talking about here that allow you to navigate stress in another way, opposed to like really being hesitant about it. Just understand what you're going through. Hey, you are the master of your own time, and you have to take ownership of your time. If you're being too accessible to everybody, then you're always going to feel like you're not accessible to yourself. And at the end of the day, you have to have these little check-ins mentally with yourself to know like what is going on with me. Because if you're taking a lot on your plate and a lot for you to process, you're not going to be able to really truly understand what is diving in the deep, right? Because you're thinking about all these things in the surface. So it's better that you get them out of your head, be able to clear out those tabs in order for you to have a better thought process. These are all things that I talk about with my members in terms of how do you get prepared for something? How do you deal with this stress? one of the things that I feel that, we're talking about routines. I tell my members about is really breathing. Find your breath. I say that all the time. I think it's important. When you're becoming hesitant or you feel like you're getting an anxiety attack, all these things, what are you forgetting to do is breathe. You got to take your breath. You got to find your breath. A lot of times we work with these athletes, and athletes deal with that, right? They're dealing with having to play in front of an audience like gladiators, and now, sometimes they can forget, you know, why they're doing that. So they're getting stuck in the thought process of me being too conscious, like me looking around. Just breathe. Forget about what's going on and focus on what you gotta focus on having fun. Focus on something else. And these are things that help you navigate stress in a better way. Working out wise, training wise, I think it's really important, and I think that I can share this with other trainers, other performance coaches. Is Man, I love when I'm training somebody and I start seeing how they start reacting to certain like workouts. For example, sets and reps. There's certain exercises I know are going to physically put a toll on you. And because of that, I like to pair up exercises sometimes just to see that person's reaction. I'll go from doing something really strength based and something that has to do maybe like with a pull, right? I like, for example, I'll use deadlifts. For example, we start doing deadlifts. I'll pair that up with chin ups, and what is interesting is that when you're doing deadlifts, your grip at some point starts giving out. And I have this rule in the gym: we don't use chalk. So your grip starts giving out. Then after that, you have to go into chin ups. So your grip is being tested there. Although they might be thinking, well, this is only 5 reps and this is only 5 reps, right? So 5 and 5, they're really doing 10 reps of grip. And that grip strength is really being tested, right? First set, they might do good. Second set, they might do good. And now coming into the third, I'm starting to see that they're starting to deal with a little bit of adversity. They're starting to struggle a little bit. How are they dealing with that? And that's where it gets interesting for me because I get to see how they're dealing with stress. And then, everybody has a different way of handling stress. Some people, they're like, all right, let's go. I'm ready to run through a wall. And they kind of like put this superhero effect. They kind of dig deep and they're able to gravitate to something that pushes them and propels them a little bit forward. While other people get to stress and they surrender to stress. That tells me a lot about who I'm working with and what I can do to make them adapt to the situation and embrace that struggle, because part of growing is struggling, and you have to learn how to struggle. You have to learn how to embrace that struggle, because it gives you identity. It gives you strength in the places that you didn't find strength at before. And I think it's very crucial when it comes to training that these are things that we utilize and things that we really base our strengths off. Stress is such a unique thing, man. I'm fascinated by it. I read a lot on it. I talk about it a lot because I feel like we look at it and we look at it as a bad thing when really it's not. It's really just our body's ability to handle pressure, right? So it can be internal pressures, which go down to the mind, or physical pressures that deal with that, or you have hormonal situations, right, that you're might be dealing with, and you have stress in that sense. Okay, I want to be as clear and as informative to you guys when you guys are seeing these podcasts, seeing these videos on your way home, on your way to work, because I feel like if this at a personal level, you can resonate it with yourself, and you can really ask yourself, what can I do to implement more routines into handling stress? What can I do nutrition wise to handle stress? That's another thing too. Have you ever seen how eating affects you the next day? As you get older, you start realizing that you're the same foods that you used to have back then, you used to crush on, or maybe you stop eating that kind of food, right? You went from, munching on certain foods, and now you go have that and you start seeing how your metabolism starts acting up. All that plays a role into how you're feeling. And you have to pay attention to that. If you're going out drinking, how does that affect you the next day, right? It's your body's mechanism of coping with whatever's going on. Being hungover is a way of the body's adapting to the stresses that are going in the body. So it's interesting how we deal with this, right? It's interesting how us as an organism really finds a way to recover when you're sore. That's inflammation happening. Inflammation is a good thing. When you have a cut, you bleed, right? And you start having inflammation in the area. Inflammation brings healing. It brings white blood cells to the area. It causes and promotes healing. And sometimes you don't look at it that way. You look at it like it's something that is a bad thing. And it's not like that. Our bodies are very resilient. You're resilient. Your mind is resilient, but you have to really dig deep, and you have to find that within you to really recognize that. Um, Man, talking about this stuff makes me really passionate and makes me feel like wanting to talk forever about this. As the episodes go on and we talk about different things and we have different topics, I feel like we can really dive into some really interesting things. I can really bring the science into it too, but I also don't want to bombard you with all this information that it's everywhere. So let's slow it down. Let's break it down. Let's have a conversation. There's topics I feel like we can all have with, friends, family, and something that can really help us moving forward. So if you guys like this episode, please like, subscribe, comment, show some love, send it to a friend. Give me some feedback. I'm okay with good or bad feedback. I don't care. For me, all I really care about is the intention that I have with this podcast and where it's going. And if you start adapting this kind of way of thinking, well, there's a reason why it's called the IV Mindset Podcast. This is what we do at Invivo. This is what we do with our people. This is what we do moving forward. I'm excited, man. See you guys on the next one. Peace.